A plethora of new data mines from Temporyal, DICE moving to a work-from-home model as the current health crisis worsens, Rush, Frontlines and Outposts to return in the coming weeks for Chapter 6, and big community news with Battlefield Bulletin retiring from the Battlefield franchise. This is your week on the Battlefield. Welcome to this episode of This Week on the Battlefield, the show where we cover news, updates, the community, and so much more all around the Battlefield franchise. As per usual, there's much to cover, so let's jump straight into it. In this week's news, we have DICE working from home. It's not exactly a secret that a certain public health crisis is currently brewing around the world and probably worsening, and thus many companies, gaming studios included, have started to offer their employees the opportunity to work from home instead of coming into the office. DICE and EA are no exceptions to this, and thus unsurprisingly, we saw the studio announce that this week they would be strongly advising their employees in North America, Europe and Australia to limit their exposure and work from home wherever possible. In terms of how this will affect Battlefield 5 and the Stockholm office specifically, while work on updates and future content will of course continue, organizing and setting everything up so that work can be done from home is of course going to take a little bit of time and cause quite some inconvenience. Thus, DICE and EA do currently reckon there will be smaller delays in upcoming content or specifically monthly updates, so most likely it will take a little extra time before we see details or in fact the actual patch notes for update 6.3 or 6.4 for Battlefield 5. In update-related news though, we got a small back-end hotfix this week, largely with the aim of solving the issues related to the end-of-round reports and of course progression. Thus, playing a full game or in some cases ranking up will now result in any progression not awarded over the past week when this bug was going on being made available to the player. Hopefully this is the last time we have to grapple with the end-of-round related issues, but given the past prevalence of the issue, I'm guessing this probably won't be the last we see of it. Some of the other major bugs that have been introduced or not fixed properly by 6.2 currently include issues with server queues and players not being able to deploy after bleeding out. Hopefully DICE can release a hotfix for this sometime soon. The second actually happened to a friend of mine recently when we were playing, and it is highly annoying as you have to entirely restart the game. In our usual news nuggets for this week though, we have this week's assignment, Gain Ground, featuring a series of infantry and team play tasks with some decent chapter XP reward potential that, upon completion, rewards you of course with another tier skip reward token. To go alongside it, we have Grind back in Battlefield 5 this week on Operation Underground, Twisted Steel, Devastation, Narvik and Rotterdam. On the note of time-limited game modes, next week promises to be interesting as we will see Rush return to Battlefield 5, rumored to also be coming to some of the Pacific maps such as Wake Island. Alongside Rush, we will of course have Week 7 of Chapter 6 of Tides of War, Hit and Run, featuring a series of Rush and infantry focused assignments and rewarding you, unsurprisingly, with a tier skip reward token. Small bit of side information for those who are already maxed out on chapter rank rewards, getting a tier skip reward token will instead, if you've already got all of the chapter rank rewards, give you 100 points to spend in the armory, so it is still actually worth completing the Tides of War challenges if you've already maxed out on chapter rank. Other than that, next week will likely be another quiet one in terms of content for Battlefield 5. There is no expectation that we will receive any update on future content or patches, and the promised information or discussion on Team Balancer is likely something we won't be hearing about anytime soon, if you ask me personally. But over in our temporal goodness, as always of course to be taken with a generous helping of salt given the data mining origins of the provided information. Since update 6.2, the man has been busy, and that's probably an understatement. To start off with, we have some additional tank customization. First, we have the Big Game Hunter here on the Panzer IV, which is one of the customization options coming that will include foliage that adapts to the camo on your tank. In this case, the snow-themed Citadel skin, and consequently the foliage is made up of, fittingly, fir trees. Next up, we have Swarm Leader demoed here on the Type 97 with the splinter paint job and made up of mostly camo nets, tank tracks and barbed wires. Then we have the Vanguard customization here on the Panzer 38T, but also available for the Panzer IV based Flak Panzer, and of course the Tiger, very reminiscent of some of the Alpha tank skins we had of course during testing. And lastly then, we have the Lie in Wait skin for the Sturmgeschütz 4, paired here with the Hinterhalt Tarnung paint job. But onwards, for there is, frankly, more to talk about than just tank customization. Firstly, for those wondering what is happening in the upcoming weeks, while we know basically nothing about future content other than there is one more map supposedly set in the Pacific that has references to it in the game files, we do know a thing or two about time-limited game modes. As you already know, Rush will be returning next week for week 7 of Chapter 6, and we have Grind this week, but after that, Outpost will be coming back for week 10, and supposedly both Frontlines and Rush for the final week of Chapter 6 with week 12. Then we also have a new weapon in the game files that isn't quite finished yet, but definitely getting there in the M1941 Johnson, a semi-auto, currently relatively similar in performance to the AGM-42. In interesting gadget news, we have references to the Bangalore torpedo used for clearing obstacles and the Type 99 magnetic mine likely to function similar to the limpet charge from Battlefield 1. And lastly, in Temporyal related news, we have a bit of soldier and weapon customization. A couple of unreleased soldier sets for the Japanese in the High Tide, Sentinel and Arashi skins, and for the Americans we have the Squared Away, Troubleshooter and Tried and True, all featuring a selection of fashionable shorts and caps. For those who celebrate St. Patrick's Day, DICE also has something in store with the Luck of the Irish set, I'm assuming for the UK faction, and the St. Paddy weapon set, demoed here on the MAB-38, but also available for the Panzerbuchse 39, MG-42 and Gewehr 43. There's also a reference to a new melee weapon in the Shelelag. Likely all of this will come as a bundle in the armory, themed around St. Patrick's Day, when of course that holiday comes around. But over in our community news, to start off with, we have a bit of sad news really, because the person behind the Battlefield Bulletin Twitter account, a long-standing member of our community and largest Battlefield news-related Twitter account, is to be no more. After 10 years of delivering and covering the Battlefield franchise, he will be moving on to provide his services for the Doom franchise and fanbase. The exact reasons for his departure from Battlefield are unclear, but it seems entirely fair to say it's likely something to do with the poor reception of Battlefield 5 and the disastrous management that has plagued this game since launch. In other community or industry relevant news, we of course have to talk about Call of Duty Warzone, which released this week for anyone who wants to jump in, of course, for free. The Battle Royale game mode has launched to generally positive responses from players and has already topped 15 million registered players, which by and large makes it a pretty big success. Frankly, it's another demonstration of the power of free-to-play for the Battle Royale genre of games, and another reminder, at least to me, of what DICE did wrong with Firestorm. A shame, really. But over in our Only in Battlefield moments, starting off today, we have Nugarios, Burt and Hainsworth showing us how to take out those pesky pilots with nothing more than an anti-tank grenade. Throw a grenade! Up next, we have something that truly hurts the soul, a classic example of mindless herd mentality that many of our blessed community members usually display. Whiffer here manning his MG42 on Narvik and mowing down 12 oblivious enemies. Next up then we have Sinful XP dishing out his usual dosage of free headshots for anybody in his sights. And lastly, another community submission by Hainsworth, this time flanking with his Lewis gun on Iwo Jima. Remember, if you want your own clips featured on the This Week on the Battlefield show, don't forget to submit it for consideration either at defiantdisaster@gmail.com or over on Twitter @defiantdisaster. But with that, we're coming to the end of this week's episode. If you enjoyed the show, found it interesting or entertaining, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share, and of course hit me up with your feedback, suggestions, and opinions down below in the comments or over on Twitter. With all that being said, however, I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and hope to see you in the next episode this week on the battlefield.